Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Graphing 101. The best thing you could probably do for yourselves is to get into your remote learning day 8, where we would find your liquids lab document. You're going to want to open that up, and then also the spreadsheet that I shared with you. You're going to want to open those up. So you're going to want both of these to be open. So when looking at our density of liquid lab, you should have your hypothesis in there. You should have, at this point, all of your data recorded by watching that virtual lab and reading the balance of the empty graduated cylinder, which you can see here. I just made the exact same mass for all of the empty graduated cylinders, right? Because it's only going to be empty once. Then you would have read the balance and figured out your mass of the graduated cylinder and liquid. And that is going to change as all of the volumes had changed. And then in order to figure out the mass of liquid alone, which is really the important mass that we want to talk about here, the mass of the liquid alone, you simply calculated by subtracting the mass of the empty graduated cylinder and the mass of the graduated cylinder with liquid. Then once you have the mass of your liquid alone, you are going to take this number and divide it by the volume. Okay, so in this first example, I had 8.41 grams and a volume of 10.0 milliliters. If you did the math, you would have come up with 0.841 grams per milliliter. Because the volume only goes to the 10th place, because of the graduated cylinder we had, none of your answers can be any more precise than the 10th place value. So all of my densities would then get rounded to the 10th place. And this is for liquid A and B, since it's the same type of graduated cylinder. It only reads precisely to the 10th place. None of my answers here for the density of liquid B should be past the 10th place. So if that is not the case, before you do any graphing, make sure these categories are to the proper level of uncertainty here. Okay, so now that you have this open, these are the number values we are going to be looking at graphing. I'm going to walk you through how to do the mass versus volume graph, and then you're going to have to do the density versus volume graph on your own. So here we go. This might be a very long video, and if I get too close to 15 minutes, I'm going to have to break it into 2 different videos. I haven't figured out how to upload a video past 15 minutes yet. I'm working on that. So, okay, so from your Google Doc, we're going to look at the spreadsheet that I shared with you. Your mass versus volume graph, okay, is the first or one of the 2 tabs at the bottom of the screen. This is the one we're going to be working with. I have a sinking feeling that these 2 tabs are not labeled correctly in the spreadsheet that I shared out. So just make sure if you're opening up by clicking on these tabs, the mass versus volume graph is where we are going to begin. Okay, so I'm pretty sure you should have this little mini data table already in here for us to work with. Okay, now you do not want to copy and paste the entire data table into the spreadsheet to graph with. And that's because we do not need all of those numbers in order to do our graphing. We very specifically want to look at how volume, our independent variable, is in this case related to the mass of each liquid. So I would go back to my document and I would first copy and paste the volumes. Whoopsie. I would copy and paste the volumes, Control C, into where my volume column is. So I'm just going to click there and hit Control V. I don't know why it does that. For some reason it bumps it down. So highlight it, pull it back up. Boop. Now you can see that this column is not reading out to the tenths place. In order to fix that, and you do want to fix that, you're going to come all the way up here to right next to this 1, 2, 3. It's the increase decimal places tool. And so I'm just going to hit that once, and that is going to add the tenths place value to my volumes, which is what I want. Okay. Now, because I want to look at volume versus the mass of the liquid to see how mass changed as volume changed, I'm going to go into my document again, and I'm going to take just the mass of the liquid by itself. I'm going to highlight that and go Control C, come back to my spreadsheet, click here, go Control V. Yes, again, it bumps me out of order. And again, you can see that some of these numbers are to the hundredths place, which they should be based on the balance that was used in the video. And again, I want them all to be out there. So I'm going to highlight, I'm going to highlight the whole column. I'm going to go up here to this increase decimal place, and I'm going to increase it twice. And so those numbers should show back up again. So that was for liquid A. Now we're going to be looking at two different lines on the same graph so that we can compare the two liquids. So I've got liquid A in there, and now I'm going to go back to my document and highlight the mass of liquid alone for liquid B. Control C, back to your spreadsheet, Control V, and yet again, I have to pull these up. Does that funny little thing, I'm not sure why. And I have to increase the indent because again, the mass, the balance read to the hundredths place. So there's my tenths, there's my hundredths. And now I'm good to go to begin using this data as a way to create my graph. It's very important to understand that the first column in the graph for our scatter plot is going to be the independent variable, the variable that was intentionally changed during the experiment. So that's volume. And then the following two columns are going to be what I want to graph and compare. And so in this case, that's liquid A versus liquid B. And we're just talking about the mass. Okay. And every good data table has a nice title that explains what I'm looking at. I am looking at the relationship between mass and volume of liquid A and B. It's very descriptive, self-explanatory, and shows what information is going to be graphed. So if we've gotten ourselves to this point, we are very capable now of highlighting the data that I want to graph and selecting the graphing tool and the graph type. Now, this is really important. When you go to select the data you wish to graph, do not include the entire beautiful title. That does not want to be part of our graphing information. I do, however, want to include the section headings that I'm going to be using to graph so that the function knows what each of these variables are. So I'm going to select all the way across and down. So just my section headings of the data table and all the data below it are highlighted now. And you could do this one of two ways. You could go to Insert and choose a chart, or with all of the data and everything highlighted, you could go up to the toolbar and look for the little chart icon and click that. And click that. Here we are. So the first thing we're going to do is change this from a column chart. We're going to scroll down until we find, come on, chart type, until we find a scatter plot. There it is. And we're going to highlight that. Okay. Now I'm going to be really looking at the graph right now, and I can see that the scale across the bottom goes by 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and that is just like my volume. Okay, and you can see over here, x-axis is the volume in milliliters. That is what I would like. Okay, I can see that there are going to be two lines here. One is for liquid A and one is for liquid B. Both liquid A and liquid B have a nice legend or key at the top of my graph. And I can see here that the mass, which would be our series, right, our y-axis, goes from 0 to 60, and that seems to want to um, show the range of the masses for both liquids. Okay. Now I'm going to scroll down right here because, can I get this out of the way? I want to see if I click either of these buttons how it affects my graph. If I were to switch the rows and columns, which I don't think is a good idea, you can see that you get a graph that doesn't seem right. Okay, so I'm going to go back down and unclick that. That is not correct. However, if I use row 3 as headers, oh, that didn't seem to change. Oh, there we go. We do want that clicked because that's going to affect our legend or key. Okay, a lot of what we're going to be doing is, trial and error. Make sure it looks nice. You want it to be visually pleasing and professionally presented. Okay, so once I'm done with the setup, I'm simply going to go over to the customize function. Okay, and I'm going to pause right here and start another video because this video is already at the 11-minute mark. And so I don't want to push the 15-minute mark. So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to start another video that will go over part 2 of what to do with this graph from here on out. So take a minute, get yourself so your graph looks like this, and then we're ready to move on. Be right back.